lie.
Feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Is the headache better?
No. Thank you. Good morning. We don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to get right to this with the question that is really the only question I'm going to ask that I really want to know the answer to. I was in a taxi on the way over here today, and there was Ariana in my face. What have you done to me? I'm afraid to open the oven for fear that Ariana Huffington's going to be there. Is she going to take over the world?
Well, last week she was in Italy launching HuffPost Italy, which was an amazing event. And I think if you look at what Ariana's been able to accomplish of taking Huffington Post from a small blog 6 or 7 years ago into what it is today, which I think is probably one of the fastest growing brands in the world around media. I mean, I hope that your experience in the taxi was a good experience this morning. I hope that in the future with things like HuffPost Live and a number of other things that we're doing around the Huffington Post that you will consume pieces of Huffington Post throughout multiple parts during the day. So I hope you did it before you got in the taxi this morning, and hopefully you'll do it later today if you haven't.
Later today, I'm afraid I'm going to see her in my dreams.
She's going to come. She'll be there.
Yeah. We just got finished hearing Jeff Jarvis say that content isn't really king. Actually, he didn't say that, but let's pretend that's exactly what he said. That it's more like a lighthouse. It's a platform for sending a signal out of. That ties in very neatly to your entire corporate strategy of making content king. So, have you made the wrong bet?
I think one of the things that we've done is take a very differentiated approach to where I think Silicon Valley has been and where we see the future. And I think one of the premises that we've been going off of in the future is that technology will continue to get commoditized, especially the current platforms, and content will end up being a really, really significant differentiator for consumers. And one of the things that we're seeing with our brands is the urbanization effect. As technology is exploding, consumers want to circle around more trusted brands. And again, I think the kind of notion of everybody wants user-generated content, when you actually look at the facts behind it, the number of apps people download 30 to 40 apps. They use 5 to 8. The average consumer on the internet uses less than 15 sites a month. That the world may be exploding, but human nature wants people to collect around trusted brands and trusted experiences, and that's really what we're investing in around content at AOL.
Up until very recently, there were two big marquee brands that were operating under that philosophy. There was AOL, and then there was Yahoo. But there's been a change in command at Yahoo, and it looks like Marissa Meyer has very different ideas for the company than did Ross Levinsohn, and has backed away from content. So does that make you nervous that they're not as content-centric and that maybe they know something you don't know? Or are you licking your chops because you now have a big, long runway in front of you?
Yeah, I think first, first of all, Marissa, I've worked with her for 10 years and have been friends with her for a long time. I think she's really talented, so I would not bet against Marissa. Overall, I think our content strategy is very differentiated, though. I think we're one of the only internet companies that's got a true multi-tier, brand strategy. So, if you just step from the outside and took all of the investments going on in the technology space overall in Silicon Valley, and then you put our strategy up against it, you would see a completely differentiated approach. And over a longer period of time, I think that is going to allow AOL to do something that nobody thought was possible a few years ago, which is to not only rebuild the AOL brand, but also rebuild a whole series of brands that will allow us to scale into different vertical markets, go global, go into new formats. I mean, in August, we were the #2 player in video views after YouTube, and we were essentially 0 on the internet in video a couple of years ago. So I think our differentiated approach is actually getting consumer adoption, partner adoption, and I think if people have been patient with us, and I think if they continue to be patient, hopefully there'll be a good story around AOL in the future.
If YouTube is the very definition of the long tail, with a head of some Hollywood stuff that's recently been appended to it. And then Hollywood is the other end of the spectrum. When you talk about content, what's content?
I see content in two different genres. One genre is high quality, trusted brands, and in that case, in video, for instance, we have 420,000 videos from the most trusted people, E! Online, Martha Stewart, Bloomberg, And we've collected a series of 14 channels around AOL On, which it probably looks more like Hollywood in terms of the quality level. On the reverse side of it, we've taken things like Huffington Post and Patch, where we have, there's about 50,000 bloggers now, and a lot of blogging in specific communities where it's not Hollywood, but in those communities, they are the trusted voices overall. So the spectrum in the two different areas we've looked at content is very trusted, high quality brands on one side, and then very significant CMS platforms on the other side. Some of the things that we've built on the content management side of things, probably the public's never going to know about, but for us as a company, it is allowing us to tap into tens of thousands of people who are passionate in specific spaces. They're journalists, they're high quality content producers, and I think that's where we see the future of content.
I hadn't actually intended to go in this direction, but let's talk briefly about HuffPost video, HuffPost Live.
HuffPost Live, yeah.
Now, as someone who has one foot in the old world, where I've made my livelihood for, since 1785, let's say, and someone very much with one foot in the 21st century, I am ambivalent about comment sections, because they are where reside trolls and morons and people who are incapable of processing anything except what fits in their narrow worldview. And it's not a place where I like to visit, because the fray it's too unpleasant. And so, am I missing something, or is HuffPo video a comment section where I actually have to see their faces?
No, it's actually interesting. There's a real mathematical equation behind HuffPost Live, which over, again, a more significant period of time, I think will prove out to be very interesting, which if you watch cable news at night, how many stories do they cover a week? 5,
I can't
10.
answer that question.
I mean,
when you say cover,
if you take whatever your favorite comment is every week that happens, or news story, sometimes they cover it the entire week for hours. They'll have show after show after show that covers the same thing. So you may get 5 topics a week with 50 contributors. HuffPost Live does between 25 and 50 segments on different topics with an average of 5 to 10 people. Some of them are experts, some of them are people who are from the community. So if you look at it, HuffPost Live is essentially a Clay Christensen model of the innovator's dilemma, where we can do 500% of the normal content that's done on video at 5% of the cost of what a normal cable channel runs at. And if you look at the usage patterns on HuffPost Live, what you find is it's got one of the highest viewership rates over time. There's, at times, there's been hundreds of thousands, but there's typically always tens of thousands of people watching. And if you look at, in comparison to some of the larger cable news programs, HuffPost Live gets, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40% of those audiences sometimes, and you think about those differentiated metrics around the amount of content and the low cost that we're doing it at. And we have a lot of work to do there, and we just launched 4 or 5 weeks ago. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that affects the way people get video, information and news in the future. I mean, I know in our offices we don't force people to do it, but a lot of the plasma screens in our offices have that up full time now, only because the subject matters are so interesting and they change all the time, and hits a real kind of sixth sense. And Roy Seekoff, who's the person who started HuffPost Live with Ariana, he's done a really good job of finding that sixth sense that consumers want in video. So I'm bullish on it.
By what means are you going to sell advertising against that and the other content we've been discussing?
Yeah, so right now, let me just talk HuffPost Live, then I'll zoom out. HuffPost Live, we're doing it fairly traditionally now, and we have Cadillac and Verizon, our 2 partners on that, and they've been integrated well. They're both happy with it and doing well as customers on it. I think over the next phase of HuffPost Live, we are talking about a number of very disruptive advertising opportunities, and I think just like the programming's live, we'd love to have live ads. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, and starting to really think about how would you produce live ads around video. And the ad space for video has a massive opportunity to be adjusted and changed to the way people actually use video online. And if you zoom out to our macro strategy around advertising, it's pretty simple. On On one side, we want to do content management system for brands, which is our Project Devil, which is a product that we put out, which is one consumer on a page, one ad, and deep, rich, engaging content from the brand to publish real content to consumers. And the second piece is very high programmatic buying, where I think we've built the second largest ad stack after Google now, and we expect things like real-time bidding and supply-side platforms, DSPs, all the things that are happening in the advertising technology space to become more important. So we have on one side, the really deep engagement brands programs, and on the other side, programmatic buying, high technology scale, high frequency trading, essentially, for advertising.
I'm going to come back to the advertising market in a minute. First, you've seen Chinatown, right? You have Faye Dunaway, my sister, my daughter, my sister, my daughter. That's Wall Street and AOL. They love you, they hate you, they love you, they hate you. Your stock has tripled over the last, say, 52 weeks. It's we're trading in the 30s now, right? And yet, you're not on a buy recommendation hardly anywhere. It's much worse than that. And there was a big proxy fight, which I guess we'll get to in a minute. What kind of weird relationship do you have with the investment community?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would just say in relation to the proxy battle, for people who aren't familiar with the proxy battle, is essentially one of our shareholders, challenged the strategy of the company, and the majority of shareholders backed our strategy. And our relationship with our shareholders is, I think, one thing they find from us is we're very direct. I mean, I have even said on conference calls with investors not to buy our stock. I'm probably the only CEO in the world who says that, which is our strategy's been crystal clear. We've been building towards it. And if you don't like the strategy, that we're not the opportunity for you. There's 2,000 companies that trade publicly, and you can go spend your hard-earned dollars buying other companies' stock. In our case, I've put my own money into the company. I'm the largest individual shareholder in, and I think there aren't many CEOs at this point. A lot of the press these days are about CEOs selling their stock. I've put tens of millions of dollars of my own personal money into the company, and I did that for one specific reason, which is, if our strategy is so good, then for me being the leader of the company, I should be invested in it as much as the investors are invested in it. And from that standpoint, I think our relationship with Wall Street is, you either believe in our differentiated strategy around it and you're behind us, which you saw in the proxy battle, our shareholders were behind us. And I would separate that from the noise that comes out in the press or other things about the company, because there's 10 or 20 investors in our company that matter. Those are the people who own the company, they own the majority of the company, and from that standpoint, they stood behind us during the proxy battle. So, Wall Street may sound like a big open thing, but in reality there's very good, very strong, some of the best investors in the world.
I'm going to stop you right here, because you just had a Romney moment, and I'm going to give you a chance to say it in a different way.
Yeah.
47% of their victims. You just said there's 10 or so shareholders who matter. You're not dissing the other.
No. I'm sorry. All of our shareholders matter.
They all matter so deep.
And let's have a 100% moment here. But what I mean is, I think about investors as the investor's investor. I mean, the people who are in our fund or who are in AOL stock are these giant funds. They have billions of dollars to invest. And I say this all the time to our management team, those aren't really the people in our stock, though. It's your mom, it's my mom, all those funds are driven by people's pension, by 401ks and those things. So if we're going to take money from any investors, all of that money comes from, in large part, individuals who work around the globe or in the United States. So from our standpoint, the shareholders that really matter, it's the big funds who own our stock, but the most important shareholders are our investor's investor. And I think from that standpoint, AOL's done a really good job. I mean, not many people gave us a chance as an investment vehicle, and I think the perception's changed a little bit. We have much more to go in that moment.
One of the principal beefs behind the proxy fight was your continuing investment in Patch, which is the network of hyperlocal news sites. I guess it was hard for these activist investors to understand how there's any possibility of that being a profitable operation, significantly profitable, at any time in the foreseeable future. Which I think is actually a very good question. How can Patch, how can it surmount things like the law of supply and demand to ever be profitable. And before I ask you the question officially, let me just say the idea is you have a very small skeleton staff locally, and then you have the big organization behind it and all of its infrastructure, including for ad sales. And one or two people are putting out all of the news, plus the community within any given community. But that person has to earn a livelihood, and you have to be able to let's say, double that cost of that employee to have any kind of revenue stream for yourself. So since nobody has been able to do that so far, how do you suppose you can?
Yeah, so let me give you the math, because this is not an opinion on my part. It's math-based, which is the average town we're in has about $900 million of commerce in it a year. If you take out autos and real estate, it's got about 350 million, 250 million to 450, but let's just say it's 350. There are the towns, we're in the highest GDP towns in the United States. We're in 9 or 10% of the towns. It represents probably getting up close to 30% of the commerce that happens in the country. All of the towns we're in, for the most part, have supported print, newspaper, radio, TV, and the individual media markets that target into the zip codes we're in are about roughly $20 million per town, 15 to 30, let's say. We're in the towns at a sub $150,000 per town investment per year. And from the standpoint, if you think waking up in a local community where you want local community news and information is important, if you think having ongoing relationships with those residents is important over time, and you think about where the world's going in the future with online commerce and how you actually reach people, local is one of the most important pieces of information that people want in their lives. And forget about the commercial data I just threw out there. If you don't think it's important about what the school information is in your town is, what the safety information in your town is, what local groups are doing in your town are, and if you're a parent, I don't know how many people in the room are a parent, but I know from my personal standpoint that the information that Patch puts out in the town is incredibly helpful for my just personal family to operate better. And the fact of the matter is, internally right now, I guess externally we have 11 or 12 million users on Patch, and we're only in 900 towns. Internally we see almost 20 million, 17 to 20 million people on Patch. And so if I told you it was your first day on planet Earth, the internet and mobile are really important items, and local is probably a top 5 item in people's lives. And I gave you all the statistics about how big those commercial areas are. Do you think over time that you could have a business that does $200,000 per town in revenue while it costs us $150,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 per town? I think over a period of time the answer is yes. And Wall Street, Patch has really been scaled up for about 2 years. If you look at A&E Network or CNN or any of the major things that have launched and started, the average publication takes 5 years to get the profitability. The average cable network probably takes 7 years plus overall. I think this is where, from our standpoint as investors in the company and our investors publicly who own the shares of AOL, this goes back to this notion of you either have to believe that's an important part of the future or not. And then second of all, is we made the commitment to our shareholders that Patch would get the run rate profitability by the end of Q4 2013. So I don't know. I mean, I know most major CEOs from media companies have come to visit me about Patch in the last 2 years, and they seem to understand it. But it's okay. Opportunities are opportunities because other people don't see them, and I say that a lot.
Well, other people have seen the opportunity, and they've crashed and burned one after another.
Yeah.
Like a nightmare air show, and some of them hit the bleachers. And if I understand there's an opportunity there, and I certainly understand that there is an intense desire there for the kind of local reporting you're talking about. Even if it isn't covering the school board, it's just sort of boilerplate local information. You want to be able to know you can get it. But if the internet has taught us anything, it's that consumer interest and desire does not necessarily translate into revenue, much less profit. A lot of this has to do with CPMs, which will be my next question. But fundamentally, you've got one guy or woman who's working 80 some hours a week to earn a pitiful livelihood, And as we've learned in the Journatics debacle, maybe cutting corners. And nobody's making any money in hyperlocal yet, and there hasn't been a major libel suit. One can just imagine when that suit finally hits, and it's for $150 million, and you're forced to spend a fortune and maybe lose in defense of someone in Peoria, Illinois, who was just too tired to pay attention to what he wrote that day.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let me be really direct about this, what I'm about to say next, because I think it's the truth. I think the truth of the matter is we've hired 1,000 journalists, over 1,000 journalists in the last couple of years on Patch. I think most of those journalists would not be doing journalism jobs if we didn't hire them. I think the amount of information and positive energy we're putting into communities in the United States, I mean, we get criticized a lot from Patch, from the media side of it, especially from other journalists. And the reality is, Patch probably does more, has done more for local communities than any other online vehicle has. And people look at it as like we're blanketing the US with these sites and putting journalists in. But the reverse side of it is, how much better has it made the communities? How many people have been employed? When I go out to these communities, I see our journalists from Patch, and the average journalist is actually enjoying what they do. They're helping their local communities out. And I wish actually there were more companies in the United States taking chances like we're taking. I think that one of the biggest diseases we have in the internet space right now is feature mentality, where people are building features for other platforms. Patch is a real product in real towns that helps real people, that matters to them, and you know, I wouldn't back down from that at all. I mean, look at the job crisis we have in the US, and Patch facilitates information locally through businesses, communities, you know, those things. So I think it's really easy to criticize Patch. On one side of it, I would ask how many companies have done something as innovative and as big scale as we have with a real product, with real communities for real people. You know, I think there's a handful of things that have been done recently that are of that scale, and you know, I don't know. I absolutely do not believe in the argument that we have a whole bunch of people who are underpaid in the field who you know, don't like working at Patch. I think it's exactly the opposite. And
no. That's not actually what I'm getting at. I'm just getting at whether, even under the current circumstances where you're paying people very little, the chances of profitability seem at best remote, and that's without some catastrophic event taking place that could just really blow up the whole business. But let's move on from that for a second.
Just quickly though, let me answer the profitability point. You know, that we will get to profitability on Patch. We'll have a large number of patches to profitability by the end of Q4 this year. So, you know, I think in retrospect, when you look 10 years backwards on Patch, this is what people are going to say. They're going to say they started something at the scale of a CNN. They got it profitable in essentially, you know, 3 years, 4 years after starting, which is probably 3 or 4 years earlier than any of the other major media properties have gotten. And they went into an opportunity space. You know, there's one other investor in the United States investing in local news right now, and I talked to that person this summer, and when I asked him, why are you investing in local news, he said, I don't know. He's like, everyone I meet wakes up in the morning wanting to know what's going on in their local community. So if you can't make money doing that, that seems like something, like an obvious thing to invest in.
If you can't make money doing that, that is a perfect transition to the next question. This thing, what do you call it, the internet, it's not really profitable for a couple of major platforms, a lot of porn sites, and maybe some premium sports channels, but and of course Google selling search. But it seems to be operated. They say the internet is run by cats, but it's not true. It's run by VCs and monks, people who are giving us all this fantastic content that we can not live without, but not earning a livelihood. The revolution has not been monetized. Can it ever be? Will the CPMs ever pay for the content?
Yeah, so let me say something controversial, and maybe you can correct me. I'd be very careful saying that content is not profitable online. I think that content is not profitable online in two different regards. One is if you're putting in the investment mode for that content, which we're doing a lot of. The other one is if you're trying to compare it to a massive infrastructure with tons of cost behind it that you have in a different business that you've been offline with, and you try to compare that to online. But there are a lot of companies that are online-only content companies that are profitable, or even if you look at the big public companies, a lot of their online divisions are actually profitable. So the noise layer around content not being a profitable, good business, works at the aggregate, but then when you pull apart the people who are investing in the future of content, which may not be profitable, but they're doing it for a reason, and then you pull apart the traditional media companies who may be really struggling to do content profitably because they're doing it in the offline model, trying to do it online. Like I've been around and met with a lot of the major newspaper investors around the country, and if you try to take a offline newspaper model with unions, printing plants, trucks driving around with gas in them, all those things, and you try to do that content online for the same exact model where your cost structure is 100 times the size, it's not going to be profitable.
But because the barriers of entry in this new world have gone from $1 billion to basically the price of an iPhone,
right.
There is an almost infinite amount of content out there.
But hold on, in the morning, what do you read in the morning when you get up? Honestly, don't make up some crazy.
It's the Sarah Palin question.
No, what do you?
Oh, Charlie, what do you read?
Bob, what do you read in the mornings?
I read all sorts of. New York Times is the first thing I read. Okay.
What's the second thing you read?
The second thing I often read is the paper edition of the New York Times, but everything that my producers have sent to me from the whole world of content. Yeah.
Okay. So
I've
how
got
many
curators for that?
Right. So my guess is, I could be wrong, my guess is your curators, they may go through the top 100 sites, but they don't go through the top 2,000 sites. And I'm going to go back to my Silicon Valley point I made at the beginning, which is everybody wants you to believe that the world is flooded with content and you can't see straight because there's so much content and the business models will not work. It's 100% exactly the opposite of what's happening. People are going to trusted content brands more now than they were before. And as we get through this noise layer around this content space, and it may take a couple more years, but as we get through that layer, you're going to start to see mega brands emerge in these spaces that are going to be very profitable, great businesses for years and years and years and years. And by the way, the mobile phone, mark my words on this one, the mobile phone's going to exacerbate that trend.
I have one more question for
Yeah.
you, then we'll turn it over to the floor. And notwithstanding the reading patterns you've just described, that
Right.
people gravitate towards trusted platforms, the fact is there's tons and tons and tons of content out there, and the law of supply and demand kicks in, and that's why CPMs are so impossibly low. And the only thing that I've heard that is going to raise CPMs is targeting, and targeting is always right on the verge of being regulated or legislated into oblivion. So I'm talking about by the laws of economics, can you ever, as a publisher, fetch enough for your advertising inventory to, even as a trusted site, ever make the nut?
Yep. So as a publisher, your revenue model has to match your content model. And that sounds simple at a high level, but the opportunities you have in the marketplace as a publisher is targeting, high-scale targeting, data-driven targeting. That marketplace, the CPMs are determined on how good you can, how well you can target and what the results are overall. The second piece is the innovation that's happening. I would say the majority of innovation that's happened online has been around the targeting model with technology, which is important, and we're huge investors now. We're going to keep investing in it. The other side of it is at a very rational human level. This is why we did Project Devil. How many, our average pages had 7 to 14 ads on them. It's almost impossible for a consumer to look at 7 to 14 ads on a page and understand what to do. And because everyone has gotten so tasered by the technology side of this, which is very positive and it will help pricing out, I think, longer term. The second piece of it, though, is what do humans interact with that matters to them, and what results can you get back? Like our Project Devil ads get about 7 to 10 times the industry average in terms of engagement. And a very simple premise, it's one consumer, one ad, where the ad is actually deep, rich content, engaging content on it. We just announced today Devil 2.0, which is coming out, and we have more stuff to announce later this week. All of that advertising is very high CPM, very good for consumers, very good for the brands, and very good for the future of the content space. And by the way, we started Devil just out on AOL properties. We now have 100 publishers taking it offline. We reach 100 million people with the Devil network now. My guess is, a couple of years from now, are there going to be real-time bidded high technology exchange ads? Definitely. Are there also going to be a set of brand ads that actually have very high CPMs consistently, where brands want to put their stuff around high quality stuff? Definitely. So I think there's that piece, and then the things that will happen in the future around paid content, which I'm interested in, around commerce-driven content, those things. Right now there's a single business model that everybody focuses on. 5 years from now, there'll probably be 5, and they'll probably be high scale. The other huge thing I would just say, and a lot of people don't probably deal with it, is the TV dollars are coming to the web. And last year was the first year TV and web got planned together. Every single one of the major media buyers I know in the United States is trying to move double-digit percentages of TV dollars to the web. They can't do it yet because the facilities and the systems aren't there yet, but I think in 2013 will be the first year we see a big chunk of TV money move. 2014, there'll probably be a really, really large chunk move.
I have a trillion other questions, but I think we should turn it over to Chuck on the floor.
If anyone has a question, just raise your hand. We'll bring a mic to you. We have a couple of us in the audience. We have a question from the audience that came in by texting. How has the failed Facebook IPO impacted AOL, if at all?
First of all, let me just put that in quotes. The failed Facebook IPO. Facebook is still worth $40 or $50 billion. So I mean, from the standpoint of what Mark Zuckerberg started a few years ago, I'd argue that's pretty successful. The reverse side of it is, what it's done for the advertising market and what it's going to do for our marketplace is, advertisers have made really big investments in Facebook. And one of the things that I hear in the marketplace a lot is once you have Facebook friends or you've signed up with Facebook, how do you actually stay in touch with them, and what's the community you build around those users? One of the things that we're spending a lot of time on is actually taking more and more of our content to places like Facebook and YouTube. And I think from the effect from us, it's actually shown a light on the fact that step one is getting all the friends, or step one is having a YouTube channel. Step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which are really important, is how do you actually engage with that community in a meaningful, value-driven way. And a lot of that comes down to content. I think one of the major threads happening in the internet right now is content is now, if social, search was 3 years ago, social's been the last couple of years. I would argue content is one or two focus on people's minds right now, and that's a benefit for us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We're done. All right, thanks.
We're done. Thank you very much.
Thanks.